Michael Jackson's private garage has finally given up its secrets. What was parked inside? Better question, what was that collection trying to tell us about the man himself? You've heard every rumor about Michael Jackson that's ever circulated. But some of the most revealing truths about him were never scandalous at all. They were sitting quietly in a garage at Neverland Ranch, wrapped in leather and chrome, waiting for the right story to be told about them. Stick with me to the end, because this isn't the version of the story you've probably seen floating around online. This is the one backed by receipts. When Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, he left behind more than a musical legacy. He left behind Neverland Ranch, 2,700 acres in Santa Barbara County's Santa Ynez Valley, complete with a private zoo, an amusement park, a train station, and, tucked away from the rides and the animal enclosures, a collection of vehicles that told a very different story about who he was when nobody was watching. Here's the part most viral videos get wrong. There was no single mysterious garage sealed shut for 15 years, waiting for a dramatic unveiling in 2024. The real story is less cinematic, but honestly more interesting, because it's true. Jackson's finances were already in serious trouble before he died, and Neverland itself had been sitting largely empty since 2005, after his acquittal in a highly publicized trial left him unwilling to live there full-time. By 2008, Jackson was on the verge of losing the ranch to foreclosure. A company called Colony Capital stepped in, restructured the debt, and took a stake in the property to keep it out of the auction block, a deal that was widely reported at the time by outlets covering the entertainment and real estate beats. So the vehicles weren't hidden. They were simply parked, cared for by a skeleton maintenance staff, while Jackson's life and finances were, quite publicly, falling apart around them. Then he died. And everything changed. In February 2009, 4 months before his death, Julian's Auctions announced plans to sell off more than 2,000 items from Neverland Ranch, including much of Jackson's vehicle collection. Jackson wasn't on board. He filed suit to stop it, and in April 2009, the auction was called off just weeks before it was scheduled to go forward. Then, 2 months later, Jackson died suddenly of acute propofol intoxication, and the entire calculus around his possessions shifted overnight. What had been a contentious legal battle over a living man's property became something else entirely, an estate that needed to be inventoried, valued, and, in many cases, sold to pay off what has been widely reported as several $100 million in debt. Estate co-executors John Branca and John McClain, both real, well-documented figures who ran Jackson's estate after his death and are credited with turning it profitable within a few years, took over management of everything Jackson left behind, including the fleet of cars sitting at Neverland. Karen Langford, who had worked as Jackson's archivist, played a key role in cataloging and preserving items from the ranch, a fact that shows up consistently across auction house records and estate-related reporting. By late 2009, pieces of the collection began appearing at auction. Not in a single made-for-TV reveal, but in stages. A Beverly Hills sale here, a Hard Rock Cafe event in New York there, a Las Vegas auction a few months after that. This is the part of the story that actually happened, and it's worth walking through vehicle by vehicle, because each one really does say something about the man who chose it. If there's a crown jewel in Michael Jackson's collection, it's the 1999 Rolls-Royce Silver Seraph limousine, and this is one detail the internet legends actually get right, because the car really was extraordinary. According to automotive outlets that covered the vehicle both before and after Jackson's death, the Seraph's exterior was a deep, understated blue-black, but the interior was where Jackson made his statement. He reportedly designed the cabin himself, and the result was described by multiple outlets as resembling the Palace of Versailles on wheels. Heavy use of 24-karat gold detailing, crystal fixtures, and ornate finishes that had nothing in common with a standard luxury limousine interior. Under the hood sat a 5.4-liter aluminum V12 producing roughly 320 horsepower, paired with the kind of quiet, cushioned ride Rolls-Royce built its reputation on. The car reflects something genuine about Jackson, a man who spent his childhood immersed in the aesthetics of old European royalty, the ballrooms, the gilded ceilings, the fairy tale grandeur, and who, as an adult with essentially unlimited resources, recreated that fantasy in the one place he had complete control over, a vehicle he could climb into and shut the door on the rest of the world. The Seraph was among the vehicles caught up in Jackson's 2009 lawsuit against Julian's Auctions, and its ultimate fate has been reported inconsistently across different outlets. Some accounts place it in later Julian's sales tied to the broader Neverland estate liquidation, alongside Jackson's second Rolls-Royce, a 1990 Silver Spur 2 limousine finished in contrasting black and white leather with its own built-in service bar. Not every car in Jackson's collection was built for spectacle. The 1985 Mercedes-Benz 500 SEL might be the most human artifact in the entire fleet, because it wasn't a showpiece, it was his daily driver, during one of the few genuinely ordinary stretches of his adult life. In the years before Neverland Ranch existed, Jackson lived in Encino and reportedly used the 500 SEL to drive himself to and from his Los Angeles recording studio, a roughly 40-mile round trip he made behind the wheel, without a driver, without an entourage. It's worth sitting with that image for a second. One of the most recognized faces on the planet, alone in a German sedan, commuting to work like anyone else. The 500 SEL carried a 5.0-liter V8 producing around 302 horsepower, paired with a 4-speed automatic and the understated luxury touches typical of mid-1980s Mercedes engineering. Power seats, climate control, burl walnut trim. When Jackson eventually moved on from the car, he didn't sell it or store it away. He gave it to his aunt as a birthday gift. She was reportedly so touched that she had a custom license plate made reading TKS MKL. Thanks, Michael. That plate survived long enough to be documented at auction. In 2009, the Mercedes was sold at Julian's Auctions Music Icons sale, held at the Hard Rock Cafe in New York City, for $100,000. A price that had far more to do with provenance than horsepower. A car museum in Tennessee later acquired it for a reported $104,500, according to auction industry coverage at the time, ensuring it ended up on public display rather than in a private collector's garage. Jackson's 1954 Cadillac Fleetwood is the collection's strangest crossover moment, because before it ever belonged to the King of Pop, it had already made its own mark on film history. This was one of the vehicles used in the Oscar-winning 1989 film Driving Miss Daisy, with Morgan Freeman behind the wheel as chauffeur Hoke Colburn. Powered by a 331 cubic inch V8 producing around 230 horsepower, the Fleetwood wasn't fast or flashy by any modern standard. It represented a different kind of American luxury, the kind built on chrome, curves, and unhurried confidence. Estimates on its value have varied wildly across specialty auction sources, with some pegging it in the $20,000 to $30,000 range and collector vehicle valuation guides suggesting a much broader range depending on condition and documented history, which is really the point. A car's price rarely reflects its story, and this one had two. One written in Hollywood, one written in Los Olivos. No conversation about Jackson's vehicle collection is complete without the golf cart, and this is where the fan mythology and the documented facts line up almost perfectly. Jackson had a custom golf cart built and decorated with an image of himself styled as Peter Pan, complete with Neverland Valley decals running along the sides. He reportedly used it to move around the ranch's amusement park section, shuttling between rides and attractions on his own private fairground. It's an easy detail to read as simply eccentric, but it fits a pattern that shows up across nearly every account of Jackson's adult life. A man who spent his childhood performing instead of playing seemed to spend much of his adulthood trying to reclaim the version of childhood he never got. The cart, along with a matching horse-drawn carriage also decorated with Neverland branding, sold at the 2009 Julian's Auctions estate sale for a modest sum. Reports place the golf cart's final price somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000, a fraction of what the Rolls-Royce or even the Mercedes commanded. But value, in this case, was never really about the number. Not everything in Jackson's garage was about luxury or nostalgia. He also owned a 1986 GMC fire truck, purchased in 1999 at a charity auction for a reported $360,000, which he reportedly used to drive sick children and their families around Neverland during the ranch's years as a functioning amusement park for visiting kids. After his death, it sold at a Las Vegas auction for $450,000, nearly $100,000 more than he'd originally paid for it, a rare case in the collection where the sale price actually appreciated. There was also a heavily customized 1993 Ford Econoline E150 van, outfitted with a television, a video game console, and upgraded leather seating, essentially a Mobile entertainment lounge Jackson reportedly used during periods of touring and travel when a full tour bus wasn't practical. Rounding things out were more everyday vehicles. A 1988 GMC Jimmy and a Cadillac Escalade, both of which he was occasionally photographed driving in the final years of his life, and a customized Harley-Davidson Road King, built to police specification and rarely seen outside the United States. None of these vehicles are glamorous the way the gold-plated Rolls-Royce is glamorous. But taken together, they round out a more complete picture. A man who wanted a fire truck to entertain children, a van rigged for entertainment on the move, and a plain SUV for the days he just needed to get somewhere without ceremony. Strip away the myth of a sealed vault and a dramatic 2024 unveiling, and what's left is arguably more revealing. A real paper trail of auction records, price tags, and provenance stretching back to 2009, documenting a collection that moved from a struggling estate into the hands of collectors, museums, and fans across more than a decade. What the real story shows is a man whose relationship with material things was genuinely layered. There's the Rolls-Royce, built to recreate the splendor of European royalty he'd absorbed as a child performer touring the world. There's the Mercedes, a quiet, ordinary car he used for a genuinely ordinary commute, later given away as a gift that clearly meant something to both him and its recipient. There's the fire truck bought specifically to bring joy to children who were sick, and the golf cart that let him literally dress up as the fictional boy who never grew old and drive himself around a park built to recreate a childhood he never fully got to have. Jackson's estate, understanding all of this, didn't rush to strip the ranch bare. Karen Langford and the broader estate team spent years cataloging items with real care, and Neverland itself wasn't sold off piecemeal. It stayed under the estate's control until December 2020, when businessman Ron Burkle, a longtime friend of the Jackson family, purchased the property for $22 million, a steep drop from its earlier $100 million asking price, reportedly intending to preserve rather than redevelop it. The ranch's story didn't end there either. In 2024, the lake fire burned through parts of Santa Barbara County and forced an evacuation near the property. A real, reported event, though one that had nothing to do with garages, gold-plated limousines, or dramatic reveals. It was simply a reminder that even legendary places remain vulnerable to ordinary things like wildfire season. If you've seen other videos claiming Jackson's garage stayed locked and unseen for 15 years, only to be ceremonially opened in 2024 by his estate executors and eldest son in front of a hushed film crew, that particular version isn't backed by any credible news reporting. It's a narrative that's been repeated across a cluster of similar videos online, but no legitimate outlet covering the Jackson estate, from Billboard to the Associated Press to the auction houses themselves, has ever documented that event. The real story doesn't need the embellishment. A struggling estate. A cancelled auction turned real one. A gold-plated Versailles fantasy next to a plain commuter sedan next to a fire truck bought to make sick kids smile. That's not a Hollywood twist ending. It's just an honest look at a genuinely complicated, genuinely human collection, left behind by a man who spent his whole life being larger than life, and who apparently needed a garage full of very different vehicles to hold all the different versions of himself. Thanks for reading. If you want the deep dive on any single vehicle in this collection, where it ended up, who owns it now, what it sold for most recently, that's a story worth telling too.